always has to be a shot at some point.
No.
They're never clean.
They have to run. That's the only shot they have.
They do it for 82 games. We're about to find out.
He already has shown what he's capable of.
Did surprise me. I thought we were going to hang in there.
This makes me think that we do need to be humble.
I actually think you're the only one who deserved that beating.
Hey, Boy Manning here with a breaking news edition of the Garden Report. Coming to you with Joel Lorenzi from the Athletic, covers the Bulls, and of course Celtics and Bulls just executed the first trade for Boston of this deadline stretch here, and for Chicago, a busy day for them with the Mike Conley trade going on that brought Jaden Ivey in a 3-team deal with Detroit to Chicago. So Bulls just loaded up on guards, Joel.
Yeah, I mean, this is who they are, right? They do this every year, but now they're especially, I mean, they're clearly not done. But as of now, I mean, they're especially, this is like an AAU team. This is like a high school team with how many guards they got. This is, you could basically make Rick Pitino the coach.
Yeah, and it's Billy Donovan. I don't know what they're doing there. We can get to that later in the show, I guess. But obviously, everyone here is interested in the Celtics angle, which to me was a bit of a surprise here. Our friend Michael Scotto reported last week, I believe, and you've done some reporting on the Bulls side too about possible moves that they could make here. And Vucevic Simons, I mean, even going back to the offseason, I felt like Drew Holiday Vucevic, money-wise, was something that made sense for the Celtics to save some money here. They obviously needed some big man depth. I'm slightly surprised this is the choice that they made here, but to me, when I look at this thing, my first reaction is that this is a money move. They go from $27 million in Simons to 21, 22 in Vucevic. Both of their salaries are expiring here, so Vucevic is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. They swap second-round picks. We're not sure exactly which years those are in yet. Celtics have a couple of really good ones this year, so it'll be interesting to see if they sent theirs out the door in this trade. And so let's say from the Boston perspective first, what's your reaction to this deal? Them losing Simons, who's been a steady contributor off their bench this year, and picking up Vucevic, who's obviously going to play a lot in their front court.
Yeah, it's interesting. For Boston, like I know they're in an interesting place and much different than I think a lot of people came into the year envisioning. Like they're still very much a playoff team and probably a good one without Tatum, and yet they can kind of like they make a move at the market. Vooch can be, I mean, I imagine the team that had to acquire him knew that, you know, they were going to have this sample of time. I mean, with him, they can see what he's like in a playoff setting if he gets killed in pick and roll, if he's getting whatever is saying, hey, in the offseason, bring him back on a team friendly deal. Is he sort of worth that? I think that was always for whatever team acquired him here right now after they've been trying to trade him for years to a contender. He gets his wish in an interesting spot during his expiring year. Geez, I'm actually getting a crazy call. Wow, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with Vooch. And it's like you said though, that's where my first thought went was, you know, like of course, like the Bulls are kind of dealing all these experience. Frankly, in these past few days, I wasn't sure they were gonna have a taker. This to me felt more like I imagine Boston was the one who picked up the phone on this. It felt to me like I knew conversation is being had, like a whole, you know, what would but like, can you hear me?
Yep, got you now.
Give me
Yeah,
a
you were
second,
saying
Marvin.
there's been some conversations.
Yeah, but I think it took Boston, I imagine for money purposes, and then for wanting someone of his archetype, like to give that a go, they probably put this deal through if I had to guess which side was more eager to do it. So
Makes sense from the money perspective too. I mean, they end up saving about $20 million in luxury tax here, $6-7 million in salary. So that's the motivation. They were pretty hefty tax team, especially for the kind of team you thought they would be coming into this year. Now they've obviously emerged as a borderline contender in the East, depending on how you feel about them here, which to me was going to be interesting with how they approach this deadline. You are looking at a team that could win the East here. And so a lot of this is going to come down to how you feel about Vucevic as a player. And you've mentioned the limitations that he has, the playoff struggles he's dealt with in his career. I'm so curious to see how Joe's going to utilize him, given some of his defensive deficiencies. And this is something I went through with Simons, obviously, too. Had him come off the bench, at times played him limited minutes, and made him do a lot of the things that they want their players to do, adjusting defensive coverages on the fly, improving that side of the ball for himself. Obviously, he had to take a sacrifice in terms of shots and minutes, all the rest. So he went through it, and there was a whole process that went back to last summer of acclimating him into the system that Vucevic is going to have to do on the fly here. So that's what I really wanted you to take me through here is how he's played this year, what Celtics fans can expect from him coming in on the fly.
Yeah, he's a flawed player and he knows it. I mean, this is a two-time former All-Star and he's some ways removed from that. I mean, he's 35 now. But at the same time, like his strengths are kind of still his strengths. Like I think what just happened here and why his desires and the Bulls' desires kind of separated over time was like the Bulls clearly weren't heading toward, winning, and Vooch wanted to be on a contender, but his strengths remain being a stretch big. I mean, he shot 37% from three this year on 4.5 attempts, and he's a clutch player. I mean, he had like three, maybe four game winners for them this year. So he's kind of like a paradoxical guy. Like he played the way you needed his presence as a stretch with Josh Giddey because you have to build around that guy a certain way. But also his flaws are like glaring. Like he can't protect the rim at all. He's not a great pick and roll guy in terms of uh, defending. Like he's a very like he's the definition of a ground bound center. And the way this thing went for the Bulls was that it just feels they've increased their desire and a sort of roller and rim protector, which he is like the opposite of. Like I
Yeah.
think they're leaning more into like vertical spacing now than they are, a stretch guy. Like they have kind of their stretch guy if they need him with Jalen Smith. Even Zach Collins is stepping out a little bit. Obviously, not nearly at the clip and volume that Vooch is, but I think his con started to with this current build started to kind of outweigh the pros of it, which being a ground bound center, being a stretch, it just wasn't working for this build.
Yeah, and I think the Celtics felt coming out of this thing that they needed a center more than they need a guard at this point. And I think just in a vacuum, regardless of position, I'd rather have Simons than Vucevic for all the reasons you just spelled out there. But I'll throw the positives out for the people here. One, if Keita goes down, if Garza goes down, obviously they're two main options at center so far this year. You now have Vucevic there in addition to them instead of two-way rookie Amari Williams and playing wings at center, which is what they've been doing to this point, and it's worked well. But you do see a situation, I think, last Wednesday in particular, where they just got killed by the Hawks without Keita, that if he goes down for any amount of time, you could be in some real trouble there. So that's obviously a positive there. The shooting, to me, could be a potentially massive plus at that position. And we know Porzingis, Horford, you can go back the last couple of years here. They love having a big that can shoot threes. Yeah. And whether it's in 10, 20 minutes, that's something that'll help them when he's on the floor, and they'll try to minimize his weaknesses, I'm sure. I feel like he's probably going to come off the bench, at least initially here. And I know you talked to him this morning about that in particular, his role going forward in his career as he goes into another stage of it here. And that sounded like something he was willing to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we talked about that today at shoot around, mostly because they got killed in Miami over the weekend. I mean, they lost by like 43 or something, and we're down by 50 at one point in the game. And after the game, he told Joe Cowley of the Sun Times, like, it's just talking about the frustration of perpetually being in the play-in and just their kind of soul tie with Miami as a playing team and how they remain behind Miami as far as playing teams goes. And so he's been pretty vocal about sort of what he wants at this stage of his career, which is to win. And even dating back to the preseason, I remember the whole contingent was kind of asking him about being in his age 35 season. I think he turned 35 like a couple weeks either into camp or after camp. And he was like, I don't know why you guys keep asking me about my age. And it's like, well, you're 35 and you just retired from international basketball. And his thing is like he still feels like he has juice and he wants to win and he's very understanding of his limitations and the fact that the Bulls wanted a different direction at center. He thought that was fine. He's very the one thing I can say about Vooch, he's probably the best professional I've ever covered just in terms of understanding other people, emotions, the whole business of the game. He's understanding of it all, and he knows his limitations and kind of why the Bulls will want to part. And a name they've been connected to is like a Ease Misi, like being connected to Ease Misi, which is like the complete opposite of Vooch. Like he's understanding of it all, but at the same time, he feels like a spry 35, and he feels like his strengths still could help a team like Boston or a team that feels the need for a stretch sufficient rebounder, which he still is.
Yeah, and that could be a big plus if Jason Tatum comes back. And I know a lot of people are talking about that on the timeline right now, how this could potentially help Tatum and the lineups in general if he does come back this year. So we'll get to that and a few other points on this trade before we get Joel out of here. I know it's been a busy day on the Chicago beat, so don't want to hold him too long here. Just want to give a shout out real quick ahead of the big game here to Prize Picks. And there is a ton going on over in the sports world right now, but nothing bigger than the big game coming up on Sunday. And obviously it's the best time to cash in. It's America's biggest sporting event, and it always feels good to be right over on Prize Picks. And since the big game's right around the corner, well, let's see what it's all about right now. And I love playing Prize Picks in general, and I love playing football over on Prize Picks, the football action. It's the last chance to get that before next season. So close the season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. New features over there. If you haven't played in a little bit, they got the community feature now, the social feeds one, where you can share Prize Picks with your friends, copy lineups from winners with a single click, copy lineups that you like, or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow Prize Picks partners like us, tail fade our picks. All the Patriots guys over on our channel over there are always throwing out their Prize Picks, so you can check those out in the social feeds feature. You got early payouts. If your player gets off to a hot start, you have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. And all of our fantasy leagues are over at this point, so you don't have to wait until next year's draft to keep playing. Prize Picks lets you play fantasy football every week, even in the playoffs. So pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft required. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 sports pick app. Download Prize Picks today and use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. For everyone who doesn't know, they are doing a max discount, as they often do. The free squares over on Prize Picks, I love those. You only have to pick 2 or more players, pick more or less on their stat projections to win on Prize Picks, and they're giving you a free one for the big game, and it is Drake May. Head over there, and Drake May just needs 1 passing yard for the max discount to win. Just add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in over on Prize Picks right now. Of course, it had to be Drake May. You could even throw in his touchdowns, anything else. Go more on his touchdowns and use that max discount, and there's your team for Sunday. So go check that out over on Prize Picks, and again, use the code CLNS to let them know we sent you. So back here with Joel talking about the Simons Vucevic trade. I'm curious, Chicago picking up Simons here. That surprises me just as much as I think Boston's interest in Vucevic, maybe more given to Kobe White, Josh Giddey, all these different guys in that backcourt, adding Jaden Ivey to it today. Simons was a little buried in Boston. He might be even more buried with the Bulls, depending on what more they could potentially do here ahead of the deadline. I know White's a free agent, but I do feel a little bad for Simons, who made a lot of sacrifices to win this year in Boston, to fit in, to not step on anybody's toes. You talking about Vucevic's professionalism. I was shocked by Simons, given the circumstances he was in, coming from being a star in Portland, having to change his game to some degree too, to fit into what Missoula wanted to do. So he put a lot of work in there, and it did have me feeling, I know there was some uncertainty going into the offseason. He was a very expensive contract in terms of luxury tax, but I felt like the Celtics were going to keep Simons after the deadline here, and that just doesn't end up being the case. And I don't know where he stands in Chicago. Why do you think they had some interest in taking him on?
Um, and for those reasons, that's why I mentioned earlier, I thought this was probably Boston pushing for this and getting the interest because it sounds like I haven't got this confirmed, but it sounds like via Keith, I forget his last name, sorry, but he's
Keith
tweeted the
Smith.
details. Keith Smith, tweeted the details. It sounds like a really good second that Chicago received, which I imagine it's part of it, like part of taking on Simons, but also like they've, from what I understand, this week is about them not just getting picks, which signals a different direction than previous years. I mean, 2 years ago they could have got picks for Drummond and pushed for the play-in. This is not just about them getting picks, but it's about getting younger players now. Simons is 26, I believe. So it's not exactly like 23, like Giddy, 21, like Modest, but he's still in that window. He's not pushed out of that window. I mean, there are older players out there. And I imagine like one, the pace these guys play, uh, half these guys are injured all the time. Like Trey Jones has missed games, Giddy has missed games, Kobe White has missed games. And to me, like you said, it kind of further signals maybe their intentions with this guard room and clearing it up, just in terms of maybe, I mean, Kobe White's the most obvious candidate. He's probably out of here, if I had to guess. Or, maybe they get a great asking price for Ayo Dosunmu. Like that's a guy who, if you want to sell high on him, his value's never been higher than right now. So to me, it sort of signals the clearing up of the guard room. If they decide to keep Simons, of course, and maybe he plays his way into like, they bring him back on a team friendly deal. Like there are very few mainstays on this team. Like there are a bunch of fringe rotation guys. The core, to me, from the way they're talked about, is Josh Giddey. That part is obvious. They got him on a team-friendly deal and negotiated with him all summer. Modest Buzelis, who is their sort of prize pick from last year's draft, and then Noah Senge, who was their first rounder this past year. He's 19, one of the youngest players in the NBA. So that's the core right there. So everything else is kind of up for grabs, and to me, it made sense for both sides, but it kind of falls in line with the youthful framework that the Bulls are following, and they get their oldest player. Well, Mike Conley's now their oldest player once that trade goes through.
Another
But
guard.
right, right, which I don't think he'll play. But their oldest player when they started the season is now off the team, which I imagine is part of the vision.
Yeah, and I pulled up the trade details you mentioned here from Keith. This one's significant. So not this year, it's next year that Chicago is going to be sending a pick from Denver, who is obviously one of the best teams in the league. So this is going to be in the 50s, the pick that ends up going to Boston here. The pick that's going to Chicago is at the moment a borderline first round pick. And this
That's a
has been
good one.
talked about a bunch going into the deadline here. The fact that the Celtics had the Pelicans second round pick at the moment here, and that's probably not going to change given how bad they've been. That goes to Chicago in this trade, and that is currently 32nd overall. So it is the second pick of the second round that the Bulls pick up in this deal here. And yeah, a lot of the reporting coming into this was that the Bulls wanted a first for Simon's salary. I think that adds to what you said about Boston probably being the one that approached about this thing. That was a week or two ago, probably some back and forth between the two sides, and they end up settling on a second, but it was a really good second that Boston ends up sending here. Celtics still have the 37th overall pick, so they have another additional second in this year's draft. Not that this matters a ton, but sometimes you do end up getting a steal around the late first, early second portion of the draft right there. Like I think Ryan Kalkbrenner was in that range, if I remember correctly, last year's draft. So
I
this
mean,
is a
you can
good
go down
pick
the
that the
list.
Bulls again.
You can go down the list. I mean, AJ Mitchell is one of the most important players on the Thunder, and they drafted him top 40. And to me, now the more we talk about it now, I mean, the Blazers are buyers, and they have the Blazers pick, which is lottery protected, which I imagine will convey in this draft. The Bulls are kind of they'll probably end up stumbling to the play-in. Like who are we kidding? But like with that being said, their pick is probably gonna be in late lottery. Like the more we talk about this, the more I think like maybe they try to group these picks together to sort of move higher. I mean, I imagine it will take a great deal for someone to move out of that top 10 in this year's lottery, knowing how good this draft is. But maybe, I mean, the thing we talk about in the market all the time is like, can they get a real star to build around? And I'm not sure Giddy or any of these guys is the star that you build around, maybe their complementary star. So that's the more I think about this. I mean, that is a great pick. So that could be used, but it overall, the pick Sweden deal just sort of signals the direction the Bulls want to go. They want to collect assets. They want to collect people in Simon's age range.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap it up here. We got the Garden Report coming up tonight after the game. Jimmy and I are gonna be back after Celtics Mavericks. Obviously, Boston's gonna play Dallas tonight on the road without Simons, given the trade here and Vucevic. I don't know if he'll join them tomorrow in Houston or certainly Friday. They're back at home against Miami. I'd have to imagine with the physicals and everything else that go on here, he'll probably be more likely in the lineup on Friday. We'll be interested to see whether he starts or comes off the bench. That's obviously something Joel talked to him about earlier today, and that he's willing to do at this point in his career. And I'd have to imagine that is going to be the role for him. I will say, again, I'm not a huge fan of this trade for the Celtics. I liked Simons. I liked what they had going here. I don't know about Vucevic's fit overall, but I will throw out 3 points of optimism before we wrap here. And I mentioned one earlier that it's just another option, another really good option in that front court if something goes wrong elsewhere. The 3-point shooting is going to be impactful, and they know how to utilize that. He's a guy, too, that players will guard. Like Luka Garza was shooting well from 3 in that backup big role. I don't know if he's a guy that you'd be running out to contest on that 3-point line. So that's another benefit to doing this thing. And then people have mentioned it. Fans are starting to mention it. This is a guy who could potentially play the pick and pop with Tatum when he comes back, which is something he enjoys having. Room to drive, room to operate inside. I don't know how I feel about that, given the reporting we saw over the last week that Tatum's reevaluating whether he's coming back this year, especially in tandem with this being a tax savings move. I don't know if the purpose of this trade was this is a guy who fits great with Tatum and it's go time when he gets back here. And obviously Simons is a guy who would have been relegated in terms of shots, minutes, all the rest if Tatum came back here. So it's possible that that's part of the thinking. I also think you could potentially keep Vucevic for another year, maybe if things go well at a relatively cheap price. So that's another potential benefit to it here. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they work around his defensive deficiencies because they do not play bad defenders, Joel, in Boston. And Mazzulla is a very defensive coach. They have to integrate him to the system on the fly. I'm not sure how similar it is to Chicago's. So I'm going to be so curious to see how this goes. Kate has played great. Luka Garza has played great as well. I'd imagine he'd be ahead of Garza in this rotation immediately, and then he can work his way up to a starting role if that's where he gets. But to me, it's going to be an uphill battle for him here. And I have my doubts about whether he can thrive the way that they want to play defense here. So we'll see. I'm going to be fascinated to see what Mazzulla says about this, less so, I guess, and more what he does with this new piece here. Do you think he's going to be a positive contributor for Boston ultimately?
I think back to the Horford fit. I know he was beloved in Boston. Horford was also like he was just clearly to me like there's a gap between him as a defender. I'll give Vooch some leeway here though. Like the team defense in Chicago has been like it hasn't remotely resembled a good NBA defense. Like the
Right.
best POA guy is Isaac Okoro, who was sort of kicked out his team's rotation at the end of last season. And so like Vooch, like while he's a ground center, not great, slow footed, whatever, um, like there's been nobody to hide him. He's not getting a lot of help in actions. Not a lot of guys chasing screens. Like it's been increasingly easy to target him because of his teammates. So that's just different in Boston. So I'd like to see what he looks like in that setting. But I think it's kind of like you said, it's kind of easy to. I imagine it'd be easy to just find him in that team defense. But he's got better pieces around him. So who knows?
Yeah, you can always find different ways to hide him. You can always play double big, all that. Last thing, the personality here, fitting in with the team, who he is around, the media, everything else. Like, what's Boston getting in that regard since you've been around him all year?
Yeah, I don't know who Boston media likes on the team, but like I imagine Vooch will shoot up to being one of the favorites. Like from like obviously I covered the Thunder for 2 years before these guys, and he's the easiest player I've dealt with. Like when we sat down this morning, he knew, what was on the docket and what we were going to talk about. Not even knowing it, he was going to get traded today, and he answered it all with grace and was very transparent and almost like had a different vibrance to him for a guy who was up against the ledger of the trade deadline again for like the third straight year. So very easy to deal with, easy guy to talk to. And is never like he's never been hard to cover, and they've been a very, very
mediocre.
yeah, I mean it's been depressing at times, and
Yeah.
save for like him kind of snapped, like even when I don't know if you saw this earlier in the year, like even when he kind of snapped at Jalen Smith in a post game interview because they had beat the Wizards by 2, and Jalen Smith was like really happy, and Vooch was like, "Yo, bro, calm down." Like even after that, Vooch gave us a whole spiel that was like so easy to write about. Like the guy was just transparent. Like even in team's worst moments, he's just so easy to talk to. So I think you guys will like him for those reasons. And then as a teammate, he's been. I mean, what can you say? He's a consummate professional.
Yeah, Celtics have some big trade exceptions too. Bobby Marks mentioned this to me earlier, so maybe they go out and use some of their savings here. I don't picture that. The Keon Ellis thing, they were connected to him before he went to Cleveland the other day. So I think this would have made a lot more sense if you were trading for Vucevic and then taking on Ellis, who's like a minimum level guy almost money-wise. So I'll be interested to see what guard they bring in here, even if it's internal. Ron Harper Jr. is playing in the G League. That's obviously a cheaper move that they could make here. I don't suspect they're done shuffling the roster a little bit here. And Chicago, who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of days here, given that, again, they have 1 million guards. Joel will have it all covered for The Athletic. Appreciate him taking a couple minutes here to talk to us and give some insight on Vucevic, who will be joining the Celtics sometime later this week. But first, they have the Mavs tonight, 8 o'clock tip-off. Jimmy and I are live after the game. Noah's out there in Dallas, so you can check out her coverage of everything Joe says on the ground there before the game. And we'll talk about some more tonight, I'm sure, after the game. So thank you, Joel. Thanks, everybody, for joining us live here. And we will talk to you after the game tonight. Peace.